Well, this evening, we want to spend some time in the story of the birth of Jesus Christ. It's a familiar story if you've grown up in the church, or maybe perhaps you were dragged to church, or if you perhaps maybe visited church during Christmas and Easter, or maybe if this is your first time in a church and you're here for the first time listening in on what Christians celebrate on Christmas Eve. We're glad that you're here. This story is a story about a man who was born, like I said, in a remote town in the Middle East. I'm going to read for us a passage of Scripture. It's out of Luke, the Gospel of Luke. Luke was a doctor, and he recorded the history of Jesus. And he states in the first chapter, he says, "Many have undertaken to compile a narrative, a story about the events that have been fulfilled among us." And he seems that it's good for him to write to his friend, to write an account of Jesus so that he might know that the things that he's heard about Jesus are very true. There's an historical account that Jesus was a real man who lived in history, and it was real time. And he stated things, and he taught things, and he made claims about himself, one of which was that he was the Son of God, which is hard to believe that any human would claim, because in order to make that claim, you have to back that up with some substantial evidence. And so when Luke records it, he goes all the way back to the very beginning. And in Luke chapter 1, he talks about the fact that Jesus was born in the town of the area of Judea. Chapter 2, verse 1, he gets into the birth of Jesus. It says, in those days, in the days when things were going on in the family of Mary, before that, John the Baptist, Jesus' cousin, was said to have been coming into the womb of Elizabeth, who the fact that Elizabeth was going to have a child was near impossible because she was old. And I'm not going to say what old was, what age that was, but it was old, and they themselves didn't anticipate a child. But God had begun to move in history, and he began to do some things that stirred up the imaginations of people, thinking if this was really the time when Jesus, or when God was going to send a Savior, a Messiah. And so in those days, there was a decree that went out from Caesar Augustus, the Roman emperor at the time, that the whole empire, all of Rome, should be registered. This was the first registration that took place while Quirinius was the governor of Syria. So everyone in the Roman Empire went to be registered, each one to their own town. Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because Joseph was of the house and the family line of David. He was to be registered along with Mary, who was engaged to him, and she was pregnant. While they were there, the time came for her to give birth. And then she gave birth to her firstborn son, and she wrapped him tightly in cloth and laid him in a manger, because there was no guest room available for them there at the inn. When Jesus began his ministry, he was about 30 years old. And as he began to wander the area that he was ministering to, the area of Galilee and Judea, he began to get a reputation. He began to call people to follow him. And in John, the Gospel of John, John records that Jesus was calling people to be his followers. He was specifically calling a few men to come around him and to learn the way of God, the kingdom of heaven. He was going to teach them. And as he was calling men to himself to be his disciples, in John, it records that Nathanael was a relative of another guy named Philip, and Philip saw Jesus, talked to Jesus, and said, "Hey, Nathanael, you should come and follow me. Let's go check this guy Jesus out." And the question that Nathanael asked him was like, "Okay, why would I follow you to go see this man Jesus?" Well, this might be the Messiah, this Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus of Nazareth. And Nathanael asked him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" And Philip said, "Come and see." Growing up, it was always, it probably still is, it was always something at the top of your mind when you went back to school. You had to ask the most important, pressing question when you went back to school, which was, what did you get for Christmas, right? And then the question was, did you get anything good? Did you get anything good for Christmas? We always ask questions about what was it like? Was it good? Is that food good? Was that movie good? Recently, my boys and I, me and Daniel, and we went to go see Spider-Man. We got some tickets. Did anybody see the Spider-Man movie yet? Did anybody? We got tickets the first night, and we were in it like late at night, 8:20, and it was a good long movie, as they are lately. And one of the first questions that people began to ask me as they found out, they asked me, hey, was it good? Was it good? You're going to go to a holiday function, perhaps, and you're going to see a spread of food, and someone's going to take the first risk of taking some food on their plate and eating it, and you're going to whisper, is that good? Is it good? Because you want to decide whether or not you're going to eat of it. We know when things are good, don't we? We know when things are good and when they're not. Cheesecake is good. Fruitcake is not. But what do we mean when something is good? When Nathanael asked the question, can anything good come out of Nazareth? When we celebrate the birth of Jesus, we celebrate things that are good. We like to do good things. I would imagine we'd say, hey, this is good that we're doing this. This is good that we're celebrating Christmas. But what do we talk about when we say things are good? What is goodness? A simple definition of goodness is that if something is good, nothing can be added to it to make it any better. When you say, man, this is really good fruitcake, said no one ever in history. This is really good. It means that you can add nothing to it to make it better. If the movie was good, really good, if something was good, if the story was good, if your relationship is good, when people say, hey, how are things going? You're like, it's good. We know that if they were to say, it's good, you know that it's not really good. You know that there is a level with which good ought to have. And that means that there is nothing that can be added, nothing that can make it better, nothing more to attain, that it's perfect. What we celebrate on Christmas is the goodness of Jesus. And realizing what we have truly been given. If Jesus really is a gift of God, if it is a good gift of God, we ought to ask ourselves, what makes Jesus good? What makes him good? Is he really good? Is he the greatest good? Is there nothing more that we could get that would surpass or supersede a gift given to us in the person, in the work of Jesus Christ? The world around us loves, and I would argue that many of us love a rags to riches story. Hallmark movies apparently are all about that. It's all about rags to riches. Some broken situation gets fixed. It's the same plot line, just different characters, different music. It's either in a different setting or whatever, but it's the same plot line, rags to riches. Stories of leaders or heroes who come from humble beginnings. We love those stories. They overcome every obstacle. They accomplish great things in history. They do big things. They do historic things. Everyday people like you and me, coming up from the dregs of society, coming up from the bad neighborhood, and we accomplish greatness and we become great people. And we turn to people and say, this could be you. And I would dare say that that's what the American dream is, right? You can have it if you work hard enough. You can have this good dream fulfilled for you. We love those stories, and those are actually really good stories. They're endearing, they're motivating. Jesus was born to very poor parents. Joseph had to go back to Bethlehem. That was a small little town in Judea. And it says that he left from where he was from, which was Nazareth. Nazareth was the hometown of Joseph. That's where he more than likely was born. It's where he was grown up. He didn't grow up in Bethlehem. He went back there because that was where his lineage was from. That's where his grandfather, his great-grandfather probably was from. And the life in Nazareth was something that was little to be desired. In fact, Nazareth was a particularly unknown village. It's only 40,000 square meters. It only probably had an estimated population of 200 to 500 people at the time of Jesus' life. 200 to 500 people. That's a small town, right? That's a small town where everybody is all up in your business. Everybody knows what's going on. You can't escape it. Nazareth's primary industry was agriculture. And most of the excavation they found was that the homes were built of mostly stone and straw as roofs. There's no like wooded area nearby. So when people built homes there, they built stone homes. They packed it filled with mud, and they made these homes, and they lived in these places of rock covered with thatched roofing. In fact, the town of Nazareth receives no mention in any historical record other than when perhaps we begin to read the scriptures and we see in the history of Jesus, Nazareth becomes famous. Jesus, we heard he's a carpenter, right? Well, Jesus was actually more like probably a stonemason. Joseph was a stonemason. Have you ever hired somebody? Have you ever shook the hands of somebody that was a stonemason that worked? Their hands they grip your hand and they grab it and they can crush it. Yeah, does anybody know anybody that works with brick and mortar and stone? It is a brutal industry. I remember I had a job when I was a college student for one day, and I had to mix mortar all day long. And there we were laying stone, and I was mixing mortar. That's all I was supposed to do. And I would have to carry the mortar to the mason, and I would have to carry back. It was the summertime. It was hot. And at the end of the day, I had blisters all over my hands. And I'm glad to say I quit. That day I quit. I didn't even show up today. I was not the courageous man that I am today. I was a fearful college student that was afraid to be honest and say, hey, I really don't like this job. It's too hard. I don't want to do it. Instead, I just took the cowardly route and I just didn't show up. I avoided the phone calls, and eventually, yes, he never called me back, and I quit. It was a hard job. Masonry is a hard job. It is a brutal thing to work with stones, to put it together, put the house together. Your hands are rough, and you don't make a whole lot of money. You have to work a whole lot of hours for a long time to just seemingly eke it out in life. And this is what this is what he was. This is what he trained Jesus to be, a mason. Jesus, when he was born in Bethlehem, eventually moves back to Nazareth. That's where Mary and Joseph's hometown was. And Jesus had humble beginnings. He had humble beginnings. He was born in a manger, which is a feeding trough, amongst animals that smell. You know, it's not a pretty scene, the birth of Jesus. There's feces everywhere. There's probably the smell of urine. It's cold. There's straw. It is not a Holiday Inn. They're not gonna be their best the next day. And this is the beginning of his life. But then he goes back to a poor town, and he grows up in a poor town, and he is anonymous for a long time until he's 30, and then he begins to introduce himself to people. And people begin to say, this man is incredible. Jesus from Nazareth. Nazareth, can anything good come from Nazareth? That's already his reputation. Where he's from is a reputation of one from a neighborhood that is less than average. It's minuscule. It's not even important. Can anything good come from there? What makes Jesus unique is that Jesus did not come from rags to riches. In fact, we like to think that Jesus had humble beginnings, and all of that's true, that Jesus was born in a manger and he had humble beginnings. He was from Nazareth. But when you begin to understand the claims of Jesus and who he was and who he claimed to be and who he is, Jesus did not start with humble beginnings. It is not a rags to riches story with Jesus. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Jesus, it says, created all things. In him and through him and for him, all things were created. He holds the entire universe with his word, with his breath, the writer of Hebrews says. In the beginning, John says, was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And he came and he dwelt among us in the flesh. God himself, the one who created all things, lived in splendor and glory and perfection in every amount of rich and grandeur that you could imagine was his. And he came into his creation to be with us. That's incredible. Think about that for a second. It's not a success story where Jesus works himself up. He actually says, the writer of Philippians, he humbled himself. He emptied himself out, and he says, I poured myself out so that I might be with my creation. So that I might be with the people that I created, so that they might know who is their God. What makes Jesus unique is that he went from riches to rags. He went from great to not so great, at least in the eyes of those who were around him. They looked at him and they said, you're not much. But as they began to hear his words, as they began to see his miracles, as they began to see his compassion for people, this God who went from the greater to the lesser, and what he does is he just doesn't escape it when things go bad. He stayed in it. He stayed in it. He stayed in the humiliating circumstances of being confined to human flesh while he was remembering the fact that he is the creator of the universe. Why would he do that? Why would he do that? Well, the reason why he did it, and the reason why he lived a life from humble beginnings, and the reasons why he goes to the cross, eventually submits himself to an empire that will crucify him, and he will die, and he will be buried. He submits himself to death because he is good. Because he is good. What makes that good? What makes it good that Jesus would go? That seems like a waste of time for some of us to hear that if he's God, why would he lessen himself? Why would he even do that? Why wouldn't he just step on the scene and call everybody to follow him? Why wouldn't he just come in and just set up shop in the Roman Empire and overthrow all of the enemies and get rid of everything all at once? Because what he wants to do is he wants to show us. Jesus is a witness of God's desire for us. Jesus is a witness of God's love for you. His entire incarnation, his entire putting on of flesh was about serving us. And I'm not talking about serving us by meeting our physical and felt needs, but what he does is he serves us with our ultimate need. You see, what makes Jesus good is that he could have completely ignored us, and he would have been in every right to. He's the God of the universe. He does not need us. We are his creation. He could have said, I'm frustrated, it's over, we're done with this. And with a snap of his fingers or with a release of his breath, all things could have just gone to mist, and we would not exist. But that's not his heart. That's not God's heart. God's heart is to make everything good again because he is good. God is the ultimate good. It is what we measure good by. There's nothing that you can add to Jesus. There's nothing you can make Jesus better. There's nothing to attain more than Jesus that will be better than him. And yet we recognize that we do not live in a world that is good. We actually live in a world that is constantly trying to attain something better. And we know our own faults. We know our own weaknesses. We have our own Nazareths where we live. We're ashamed of where we're from. We're ashamed of what we've done. We don't seem to be able to get a leg up. We are always getting to a spot and thinking, I'm not good enough. This is not good enough. I need to do better. Jesus comes and takes care of the one need that we need, the only need that we absolutely necessarily need. And the need that we have is to be reconciled to our Creator, to be back in relationship with a good Creator who originally created everything to be good. And what he does is in order to bring us back to himself, he has to make us good. Remember what the definition of goodness is. Goodness is not needing anything more to be made better. There's no attaining of anything better. To be good is to be perfect. Now, I know some of you think you're perfect in here, and you've got the perfect gift. But your perfect gift is going to let somebody down, right? This is the perfect gift for you, and then it's going to be maybe perfect, but eventually over time it'll wear off and it won't be perfect anymore. It won't be good. Some of you think you have it all together, at least today. And then sometimes that all falls apart. We don't have it all together. The situation is not always good. Being good is not behavior. I'm not talking about good behavior. I'm not talking about being naughty or nice. Jesus doesn't make us good so that we can be good. It's like, oh, once we're Christians, once we start following Jesus, we start doing the right things all the time. I know that that's not true because I put my thumb on the iPad scanner for the naughty or nice scanner, and I came up 34% good. It's 34% naughty. 34%. I was only at 34%, so it does not look good for me. The good news, the gospel, what Christians believe and what we trust is that the goodness of Jesus is in the fact that Jesus, in his goodness, in his perfection, did what we could not do. The goodness of Jesus is that he gives us the gift of his merit. He gives us his good behavior. He gives us the forgiveness of sins. He gives us his life in exchange for ours. He gives us his goodness, which is perfect. And he gives it to us so that when all things are made good again, because in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and he looked at all of his creation and says, it is good. It is good. It needs nothing more. Except when he creates man and woman, and he puts them in the creation. And then he says, this is very good. He creates a perfect creation for mankind to dwell in because it will be good. It will be very good without any need. There's no more need because in the first creation and in that garden, a perfect God lived with a perfect creation with his perfect people. And that got messed up when his people did not trust him in his goodness. And what makes Jesus good is that he does not leave us there. God does not leave us in that state. He comes and he enters into his creation and he puts on flesh and he experiences all of the humiliation and all of the death and all of the sorrow and all of the sin so that we might be given the gift of his goodness. His goodness. When we look at the manger, when we walk out and we look at the manger and there's baby Jesus back there, not in proportion. It's fairly small, baby Jesus. When you look at that baby in the manger, as you see the baby, as you see Jesus lying there, what you're seeing is a summary of what he came to do. It's the life that he lived and the task that he accomplished for us. It's what he did for us that makes him the good gift. That's not the beginning. His beginning started eternity ago. That is just the sign of his goodness and the love that he has for us, so that when he comes again, we will see him as he really is, and we will be made good if we trust him. So when the question is, can anything good come from Nazareth? The answer is absolutely. Absolutely. Can anything good come from Nazareth? And then Christians say, come and see. Come and see. I'm not sure what your Nazareth is. Nazareth is could be an image for you that you think about, man, what is my past? What is my present? Is it less than ideal? Jesus understands where you came from. He entered into it. And what makes him really incredible is that he can identify, have you lost a friend? Jesus lost friends. Have you lost a loved one? Jesus lost a loved one. Have you been rejected? Have you been shamed? Jesus has experienced all of that. Do you experience the distance from God? Jesus has experienced that as well. And Jesus' gift to us this Christmas and every Christmas and every day until he returns is the gift of his goodness, because he is good. And it's a gift for you, freely given. You don't need to earn it. You just trust him and you say, Christ is my gift. I receive his goodness and I will follow him as my Lord. That's the Christmas story. That's the Christmas gift.